I am so excited for this conversation I'm about to have with Robbie Baxter, who is a management consultant and the author of the book, The Membership Economy. Find your super users, master the forever transaction, and build recurring revenue. And we're going to talk a little bit about a question that's on a lot of people's minds right now, which is how do you create a business model that keeps you sustainable, that keeps revenue coming in, and most important, keeps you actively engaged with your customers. Robbie, thank you so much for coming here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lisa.
It's really exciting. So Robbie, first of all, what is the membership economy? We've heard about it from American Express. They're probably the most well-known for the membership play.
Membership has its privileges.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a massive transformational trend that I've seen with virtually every industry, from software to hospitality to financial services, and it's all about a move from ownership to access, from anonymous transactions to known relationships, and from one-way communication where you're just pushing messages at your customer to an open conversation, not just between you and the consumer, but also among the customers themselves under your umbrella.
So this sounds like this is a fundamental strategy shift. I mean, really a very different way of thinking about how you engage with customers in every aspect of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about putting the customer at the center of everything you do instead of the product or the processes or even the technology.
So what's so special about it now? So we're here at the Global Summit. We're talking a lot about exponential technology.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the core elements that are enabling this transformation to happen around membership.
Yeah, well, so membership is not new, right? I mean, we've had membership since the 12th century, trade guilds and religious groups. But what's happened recently? Two big things. One of them is that technology has extended the infrastructure that enables trusting relationships. So we've always wanted to have these long-term relationships with the companies that serve us, but now it's possible to do that not just with companies that we know personally, like the shop around the corner, but actually with organizations where we've never met anybody. And these are through technologies like always-on devices, mobility, artificial intelligence that gives us a personalized experience, the ability to connect networks. All of that is enabling new ways of relating. The other thing is the influx of capital, financial capital, that is giving entrepreneurs a longer runway to build relationships with their customers before they actually have to generate revenue.
So the fact that we are always connected and we have so many different ways to connect is enabling these organizations to think differently about how to be a part of those connections.
Yeah, it's like a new palette of colors that you can use when you're painting your business model.
I love that. Can you tell us, can you give us some examples about some companies that have taken advantage of this new palette?
Yeah, well there's two groups. There's what I think of as the digital natives, the Amazons, LinkedIn, Netflix, who started their businesses thinking about the forever transaction, thinking about this long-term, member-oriented approach. And then there are companies that have transformed to membership models, companies like Intuit and Adobe, who have moved from these anonymous boxed transactions to a real ongoing relationship, subscription model, community with the people they serve.
I'd love to dive into that second group because I imagine a lot of people listening are probably a part of a more traditional organization and they're wondering, yeah, I want to be a part of this next way of thinking about my business model, but I'm not sure where to begin.
Yeah.
So what have you seen companies do well when they're making the transition from a more sort of anonymous buy to a more customer-focused, long-term relationship service?
Yeah, well, so the first thing that they do, I mean, the minute you have a good product, it's kind of ironic, but the minute that a company has a good, successful product, it makes it hard for them to go back and really be customer-focused because now suddenly they are beholden to the product they've created.
Yes.
So the first thing that I always suggest is to take a step back and go look at your customer again and try to understand what it is that they really need, what they're trying to accomplish, and how you'd be solving it maybe if you were starting from scratch. So you kind of get a whole new set of ideas, and I know you're really big on design thinking and creativity, and this is right up your alley. That's really where to start, and then it's about doing small tests and iterations as opposed to going away and coming back with like the jazz hands and the big reveal, like ta-da, but really testing with customers and adjusting along the way.
It must be really hard to ask them to shed what they know. I mean, I think sometimes we get stuck with the curse of knowledge, what we know. Are there certain prompts that you give them to get them into a more generative mindset?
Yeah, so for really big companies, I say, what if your most creative team member left and hooked up with a technologist from your favorite tech company and a guy with really deep pockets, and they went after your market? What would they do?
I bet that jolts them up.
Yeah, well, because so often, like I work with a lot of media companies, for example, and they'll say, well, we have a lot of printing presses, so we really can't move away from our print, right? Or we have newspaper delivery people, so we can't move away from print. And you think, well, gosh, that's not going to stop a startup from going right to digital, which is more convenient and also has a less capital intensive model.
What I love about that prompt is that it's so specific. I think everybody can imagine their most creative employee, and then it's not hard to imagine them leaving and what that would do to an organization. So I love that example. All right, you talk about another example that really captured my imagination, this frictionless car wash. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, so it's a funny story. So a few weeks ago, I was at the International Car Wash Association annual event, and an event, like this one in some ways, but also, all about car washes, so it's a little different. And one of the things that they were asking me about is, how do you do unlimited car washes by subscription? And, a lot of the car wash companies are moving toward that model. And the main reason they're moving toward it is to have this forever transaction with the people they serve who want a forever promise of always having their car be clean. That's what they want. Nobody wants to go to the car wash. You want your car to always be clean. But the second thing that they learned, so they knew that that was a real driver. And so they priced it, basically, it's like 3 car washes, the cost of 3 car washes gives you unlimited car washes. But what they realized is that some people who only got 2 car washes a month or even 1, that they wanted unlimited car washes so that they didn't have to talk to anybody. They wanted a frictionless car wash. They said, I will pay a premium so that I can just wave my card when I come to the car wash and not have to talk to anybody as I go through and not have to exchange money or leave a tip, because those were the moments of friction that made them dread doing the car wash.
Interesting. So what I heard in that is 2 important things. One is, can you reframe the value proposition? So going from getting your car washed to really having a clean car all the time, right? So it's not about, and the other is really paying attention to those sticking points. Like, who would have thought that talking to somebody would be the thing that keeps you away from a car wash?
Yeah, we want connection, but maybe not with our car wash guy.
Right. Exactly, exactly. So Robbie, you know that at Singularity University we spend a lot of time talking about impact. Does the membership economy work in the social sector? Are there other examples that you've seen of organizations that are not necessarily in the corporate world that are using this strategy?
Yeah, well, you guys talk a lot about grand challenges. And one organization that I work with, the American Nurses Association, has a grand challenge going on right now where they're focused on helping the 3.5 million nurses in the US get healthy. Because nurses are on the 5 major elements of health, which is like, stress, sleep, weight, smoking, and I think drugs maybe. I think those are the 5. They perform less well than the American population at large in 4 out of 5. So they're using online community, they're using their subscription model, they're using their live events, all to support this initiative, this grand challenge around making nurses as healthy as possible this year.
That's really exciting because, of course, if nurses are healthy, then that has this cascading effect for what happens to all of their patients.
Exactly. It helps patients' families, it helps communities. So,
that's one of the things we talk about when we help leaders think about how they can all become impact drivers, is to think about what is the theory of change and how do you map a system of flows. And this sounds like an interesting example.
Yeah.
So we also have a lot of entrepreneurs in our community, and many of them come up with new ideas and first think, I'm going to give it away for free, the whole freemium model.
Yeah,
so,
love freemium.
Yeah, freemium. Tell us what you think about the freemium model.
Yeah, so freemium is a hammer. It's a tool. And there are places where it is the best tool and places where it's really a clunky tool. Freemium does 3 things. One of them is it gives people an opportunity to change behavior by trying something for an ongoing period of time at a very low cost. Second thing is it creates a network effect, which is it creates more value for the other customers. And the third thing is it serves as a marketing channel. So if I send you an email and at the bottom of it, like Hotmail did, it says, get your own free email account here, then you're actually part of the channel. So those are good reasons. If you don't have one of those 3 reasons, don't do freemium.
I know you talk about LinkedIn. I think that's a great example of freemium as part of a larger strategy, and would love to hear that example played out with freemium being a part, but not all of how they think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I said there were 3 reasons to use freemium. LinkedIn uses all 3. They use it to change behavior. So we used to use, people don't maybe remember this, we used to use Rolodexes to keep track of our contacts, and we used to have physical print resumes that we used to let people know what we were up to. So LinkedIn wanted to change the behavior to having us post our resumes and to keep track of our professional connections through their community. So that was the first thing. Second thing is LinkedIn becomes even more valuable with each new person that joins. So there's definitely a network effect. And the third thing is that most people that are on LinkedIn were invited by somebody who's already there. So actually the members of LinkedIn, the free members that aren't paying, are actually bringing other people in. And the way that LinkedIn pays for itself is through recruiters, salespeople, and people looking for jobs. And those 3 groups are willing to pay a tremendous premium for access to that large network.
What I love about that example is that these 2 business models, one the freemium for those of us that just want to have our professional resume out there, and the other with the paid membership of the recruiters, they feed off of each other, right? They become more valuable the bigger that they get. And I think that's a really important connection that is not always made, that sometimes these things operate separately.
Right, and the thing that I think you're bringing up also is that freemium works really well when there's a network effect.
Yes.
But when there's not, you might want to try like a free trial. Like if they're saying, I don't know what it tastes like, then you give them a taste of the best that you've got, like a bite of your filet mignon. But if they're like, well, I just want something free to fill me up, then you give them hamburger forever, and that's really what freemium is.
Yes, interesting. So Robbie, I think that all leaders are going to need to really take a hard look at their business model. What suggestions would you have for leaders that want to really understand how to get into the membership economy and how to make sure that they really are getting their leadership team prepared for thinking very differently about strategy?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to get them out talking to customers and really understanding what is the value that they provide, what is the, as Clayton Christian says, what's the job that your product does for them. And that's one piece. Also getting into their shoes and understanding what technologies they expect and see as the new normal. And the other thing is not getting too wrapped up in the technology. Because even though technology is great, it's not great when it's not in service to an actual benefit for the person you're trying to serve, the customer.
That's such a good point that you made. I mean, we're in Silicon Valley. We get very excited about technology, and sometimes we forget to check if it's actually serving our customers.
Right. So sometimes it's just about the cup holders.
That's right. Sometimes it's just about having the augmented mustache on the thing, and we don't really know if that's actually adding value. And do you ever help your clients really understand their customers differently? Do you go on customer visits, or how do you help them do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we go on customer visits. We do surveys. We call them up and talk to them. We do whatever it takes. And one thing that I think, you mentioned that you have very large organizations here and very small. Sometimes people say, well, Robbie, you don't understand. We're a very small company. We're lean. We can't talk to our customers. And I say, the corner store, they can talk to their customers. Everybody, you might even have a bigger advantage in knowing your customer when you actually see them or you have a limited number of customers. So while the bigger companies might be using very sophisticated analytics and research systems, you don't need that. Sometimes it's just enough to talk to your customers and ask them what they need.
I think that is such an important point and something that everybody can do. If you have not talked to your customer in the last week, go and find a customer and talk to them. Yeah. Another thing, Robbie, that I know you do is you're a constant student of different business models, and you've got lots of examples in your book, but you'll look at anything from the CrossFit community and really understand how that's taken off to churches and other different kinds of organizations. So how do we become more curious? How should we look at new businesses? What are some questions we should ask?
It's a good question. So becoming more curious it's innate. We all are curious. If you've been with a 4-year-old recently, we are born to ask questions.
Yes.
And over time, I think we get embarrassed about it or we think we know too much. So what I'd suggest is, ask questions, look at businesses, think to yourself, why is this business successful? What can I learn from this business? And putting things together. A lot of people have said to me, we want to be the Netflix of our industry, right? And on some level, you can't copy an organization. On the other hand, if you say, what would that look like? So you'd ask the second question. So, okay, great. What would it look like if you're the Netflix of your industry? What would that be? If you Amazoned your competitors, what would that mean? And so sometimes just asking the second question is a great way to really break open a paradigm.
Great. Well, so many wonderful things that you have to share. Go and talk to customers, ask better questions, try to understand which organizations are doing well and why. Be curious about it. Robbie, thank you so much for coming today to talk about the membership economy and how we could all be better connectors with our customers so we can build forever transactions and sustainable organizations.